So I start every video with you can there's your there's your outtake. One of the most important relationships in business that definitely doesn't get talked about enough is your banking relationship. So many of us as entrepreneurs, especially if we started companies from scratch, we found the bank that was literally the closest one to the office, and that's where we started to bank. We didn't think about whether it was a national bank or a local bank or a regional bank. It was just the closest one. And I'm not talking about banking from the transactional perspective. I'm talking about the bank as a partner in the growth of your company, as a provider of growth capital so you can get your company to the next level. And that's the banking that I'm going to talk about. Your bank really is, if they're going to lend you capital, they're really like a partner in your company, but so many of us treat the bank like a vendor. So a couple keys on the banking relationship that I think are fundamentally critical. A regional bank versus a national bank. National banks have loan committees that make decisions on lending that are in states maybe 10 states away from where you are. A regional bank has a loan committee that you can actually have access to. You can get to meet some of the people on the loan committee, which we highly, highly recommend. One of the benchmarks we like to joke is a bank where you could actually have lunch with the CEO of the bank. That's one of the perfect descriptions of the size bank that you really want to be thinking about for your capital needs. So when you get that banking relationship and when you start to develop it, if you can think about things from the perspective of the bank, not the perspective of yourself, and think about the risk that the bank's going to take on to lend you capital, and then if you can speak to those risks and help the bank understand how to mitigate those risks, there's a much higher probability of being able to get capital. Another rule that we really like to follow, banks that understand cash flow-based lending instead of hard asset-based lending. So some banks are in the business of helping people buy buildings and equipment and run factories, and that's fine. That's an asset-based lending bank. But really, if you're going to do acquisitions or you're in a services business or you don't have a lot of receivables to finance with, you want a bank that really understands giving capital in exchange for strong cash flow companies. And the collateral may not be as prolific, but the ability to borrow on the cash flow of the business is much higher than at an asset-based bank. It's fundamentally important that that's part of the banking relationship. And the most important rule and the most violated rule is ask for capital from the bank before you need it. So the time to go to the bank is not after, you've run into some financial trouble and you've got a cash flow problem and now you have to convince the bank that it's a good idea to lend to you. So before you need the capital when things are good, you want to at least put lines of credit in place. A line of credit is essentially like having the cash in the bank for emergencies. So you get a line of credit in place, and then you use that line of credit a couple times a year. Again, thinking about the bank's perspective. If you don't use your line of credit, they got some fees to set it up, but then they don't earn any return. And that capital they can't lend in other places because it's tied up in your line of credit. So you want to move into and out of your line periodically, maybe once or twice a month. Zero your line out multiple times a year. It really looks good if you're able to get the line back to zero. And then every year you should go to the bank and ask for an increase in that line. Again, the capital before you need it. And you're starting to build that relationship with the bank. Then maybe if an acquisition opportunity comes along or some other bigger project, maybe you do want to buy a building or whatever it is, you've established that relationship. You've established they've already been involved in assessing your line of credit, and they understand your business the more you interact with them. When you need those bigger loan opportunities, they're much more likely to say yes because you've built the relationship. So the takeaways are borrow before you need it, get lines of credit in place, increase them every year. Certainly find a bank where you can at least meet the CEO, if not have lunch, and get to know loan committee. And think of your bank like a partner, not a vendor.